Okay, this talk is a presentation of the first results and the expected outputs of a project that we are running in Sud Tirolo about gender gaps in mathematical achievement. And let me say, as you've already listened in this conference, gender gap has been extensively studied from several perspectives, and we report our first result, and I will try to sketch our framework for examining the gender gap in math achievement in a very particular region such as Sud Tirolo. And so we tried to intertwine both analysis of large-scale assessment and local result of large-scale assessment, and on the field qualitative investigation. So the main goal are to describe the extent of gender gap in South Tirol, and to detect some peculiar features of how gender gap appear in this region. And as expected outputs, we want to produce both analytical reports in order to have some influence on local policymakers, and mainly guidelines for teachers to be used for shaping didactical practice in the classrooms. And our starting hypothesis, indeed, is that the different factors that are known to have an influence on math achievement, in particular on gender differences in math achievement, are detectable indeed also on a microsocial level. That is to say, if we think to cultural or emotional or let me say behavioral aspects that are from different perspectives and ideologies have been studied for relating to the gender gap, many of them we can see that are reproduced in the microsocial group of the classroom. And in fact, many of the categories that are used to study can be interfaced with theoretical constructs that are commonly used in math education research. I'm thinking to the contradidactique of Rousseau, or socio-mathematical norms by Haeckel and Cobbs, and also everything which is related to beliefs can be fruitfully described by using categories that are commonly used in math education research. And so this is our starting hypothesis. And our strategy followed two lines of attack: to explore the gap at the item level, as had been studied, for instance, also by Dr. Spampinato before, using both statistically based tools like the differential item functioning, and more generally an analysis, a visual analysis of the behavior of distractor plots and characteristic curves. And the second line of attack is to explore teacher perspective with respect to the gender gap. In fact, what was our starting point is that gender gap, as revealed by large-scale assessment, exists in Sud Tirolo. And this can be detected by different large-scale assessment, both INVALSI test and, of course, PISA. But for the German population, we have a different tool, which are the Vera test our German students take the Vera test, which are German tests for achievement, that have a different framework both for contents and for processes, but nevertheless they reveal for the German population of the region the existence of gender gap. And as I said before, between the many variables that are used for describing the factors which affect the gender gap, the different theoretical lens, we endorse the idea that it is particularly influenced by cultural and social causes in the milieu, in the classroom habits. So we developed this, our analysis. This is the well-known graphs of gender gap in PISA, and if we look more closely to the gender gap detected by PISA in the province of Bolzano, we see that it is even higher than in the rest of Italy. And the same is true if we look to the results of the Vera test, and these are the Vera tests for grade 3 and grade 6, and for the INVALSI test. Not all of the differences are statistically significant, since for some grade the sample
These differences
are not statistically significant. But anyway, we have differences. So you see the number of people are not so large. So we started to bring our analysis at the item level, as was suggested in the literature, in order to deepen the effect of the gender gap. And we started by looking to the whole INVALSI bank of items, looking to the items which had a strong gender gap or a difference between male and differential item functioning between male and females. And we individuated a group of items, and then we started working on them for constructing the qualitative part of our analysis. So, yeah.
Okay, so we observed that in INVALSI test we have a gender gap, a strong gender gap, and this gap is more remarkable for the region of Bolzano. And we want to focus on these differences on an item level because we think that only an analysis to an item level can pinpoint the mathematics in which this gap is more is higher, and then focus on these items to understand better the causes of this phenomena. To do that, we developed a new index, which is the gender gap index, and it is really simple. So it's the difference between the male percentage of correct answer and the female percentage of correct answer, and over the percentage of correct answer of the whole population. And we use this simple index to have to classify all the items of different tests, and then focus on the items in which this gap is more remarkable. So we understand that the gender gap is not equally distributed on all the items, and so this is the first point that we want to highlight, and also that the distribution of the gap at an item level is not the same for the national level and the regional level. So we can, our hypothesis is that there are similar but not the same causes for the gender gap in the national level and in the regional one. We can also see that those are some tests we have analyzed. You can see that these questions in which the gender gap is higher are not questions from the same content. So we have not only, for example, space and shapes or numbers items. They are not items with a low percentage of correct answer, but also easy items can give a strong gender gap. So we want to analyze which are the characteristics of these items to understand the causes of this phenomenon.
Of course, it is really different if you have 10% of difference of correct answers in an item with 80% of global correct answers and an item of 10%. You will see differences also in the functioning of the item, of course, since they may affect in a different way low-level and high-level students. So the difference in itself must be specified at an item level. And having the INVALSI data with hundreds of items, which allows to close the focus on the items that produce in this particular situation, which create the gender gap. And in fact, as Chiara told, items belongs to different content area and requires different, let me say, cognitive processes in order to solve them. But nevertheless, they have some similar feature that give a way for investigating how in the classroom this may happen. If there are classroom habits which in some sense reflect stereotypes or beliefs of the teachers that create let me say, a negotiation between students and teachers, and hence a different outcome of results.
So we started then from this analysis, this item level analysis, and developed our tools, and our tools are in particular three. So the first one is a student questionnaire, and we want to analyze using this questionnaire the affect and beliefs of the students related to math, of course. And the second one, which is the one we are going to present today, is the teacher questionnaire, and we want to analyze teacher perception of gender differences in math. So then in a second phase we will interview students and then make focus group with the teachers to go deeper into this phenomenon. So the student questionnaire is based on, of course, already used questionnaires such as TIMSS, PISA and INVALSI questionnaire, and we investigate many aspects, but as I said, in this situation we want to analyze better the second one, so teacher questionnaire. The first question we posed to teacher was think to one of your students, one of the students you have in your classroom now, this year, and think which are the three characteristics of these students that give him to the possibility to be good in math. So think to the best students and then to the three adjectives of being good in math for these students. And we collected responses from around 50 teachers, and they described 3 students each. So we have around 150 description of students, and between these the 55% are male and the 45% are female, so there is not so much difference in this case. But as you can see, the two description of male and female good in math are strictly different. So
just for looking to your stereotypes, which are the male and which are the females? Which are the adjectives describing male, boy, and which are the adjectives describing the girls? Beh, c'è il genere nella parola, ma è troppo facile.
Because it's Italian.
So these are the original.
It's very English.
In English,
it would have been much more tricky.
Much more tricky.
Yes, of course, and also the way we ask the teachers to describe the students were influenced by Italian language, because we had to say
is a point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had
It's
to-
a gendered language, Italian.
They were not aware of the fact that we were investigating gender gap.
But they
Okay.
may think
Maybe they may infer
about that.
something.
But I think that the two profile identify are strictly different. As you can see, there is intuitivo, which is in both the two descriptions, so maybe it's something related to math. So to be good in math, you have to be intuitivo. Even if you are male or female, it's the same thing. But as you can see, there are two really different dimensions of diligente, or precise, or interested, or attenta, and many others. So a male, and another interesting thing is the word veloce. So to be speed doing math is a characteristic of male, but not of females. And also tenace for female. So you have to be strong and persist to do math if you are female, but this is not the same characteristic for male. So we think that these two first description, and we will
This is teacher
all grades from primary to secondary school.
because the
Yes.
veloce is I think for the primary school.
Maybe we don't, but we think to go farther and try to have more teacher answers on this questionnaire. Maybe also not only from the region of Bolzano, and so I think that this description could be also a little different, but not so much. And then we want to also understand which are the perspective of teachers on the gender gap. So if they are, if they know this situation in Italy, if they saw some situation of this phenomena in their classroom, and if they perceive that girls have more a higher level of math anxiety and a lower level of math self-concept and so on. So we take the questionnaire used for students and then use this questionnaire for teacher, asking them if each sentence is more related to females or males. So we use the same one but for teacher. And as you can see, for math anxiety, the teacher perceived a more anxiety for female. In particular, as you can see in the first one, so difficulties are related to math lessons, but also for marks. So when females have to be evaluated, they are more anxiety, and teacher perceive that. And a similar thing is also for math self-concept. Of course, male have a stronger math self-concept, and teacher have this perception. And we also ask them if they know the phenomena of gender gap and if they have observed this phenomena in their classroom. And more than 60% of teachers say that they are conscious of this phenomena. And 46% of them say that they have noticed differences in math in their classroom. And when we ask them why, how do you explain this phenomena, they use many of the constructs used also in mathematics research and psychological research. For example, they refer to anxiety, to fear of making mistakes, of course more fear for females rather than for males. And they also refer to different strategies. So males are more prone to trying different strategies, trying new ways of solving one problem, while females are more related to strategies already seen in the classroom work. So
what we see is that, in fact, in teachers' perception, all the elements that we know from the literature about beliefs and stereotypes are present in our province. Now we have to pass to the second to the second step. We know that there is a gender gap in math achievement. We know that this gender difference is reflected in the behaviors observed by teachers in the classrooms. We know that this gender gap exists since the beginning of the data available, grade 2 for INVALSI, grade 3 for Vera. We know that this difference is concentrated on certain kind of items, in particular to those items which are, let me use a naive construct, far from didactical practice, far from what is usual to be assessed in the classroom. And this is reflected also in the description of males and females given by teachers, which attribute the adjective diligent, studious, attent to females. And in fact, we see that in items which can be close to this description, there is no gender gap. While if we look to veloce, items which requires time, if we attack them in a let me say, standard way, and that can be solved quickly if we have some intuition or some idea. And if we look to contextualized items, you see a huge difference between male and females. And this is reflected, we see a parallel between the item level analysis and the perception of teachers. So it gives us a strong suggestion that we have to work on classroom practices in order, of course, making teachers aware of the problem, the extent of the problem in their province, and the particular features of the problem in the province, and to give them tools for, let me say, handle the classroom situations in such a way that they don't reproduce this kind of stereotypes which give a circle. Since if you have this perception and you have these habits, then females will behave in this way, and it is a circle, self-generating. So we think that creating tools for making teachers aware of the problem and of some features of the problem may help in working of this difference.
Okay, thank you.